Samsung has built literally everything from a family car to a butt robot. It's a crazy company, so here are my top 40 things about them. Samsung has a huge office park in Korea, all to itself, called Samsung Digital City. It's quite possibly the company's most important bunch of buildings. It's where their Galaxy smartphones are designed, and even where some of the first curved TVs were conceptualized. And this Samsung City has a couple of interesting things about it. There's a specialized chamber that is decked with soundproofing pads to create pin drop silence, and this is actually where the audio performance of phones is tested. They even have a sound lab filled with instruments, which is where a lot of those iconic ringtones and Samsung alert sounds are actually created. Plus, Samsung has a philosophy here called Work Smart, where employees can show up at whatever time they want to, up until 6 PM, just as long as they feel productive. I quite like this one. And even aside from this headquarters, Samsung is big, and it's actually tough to conceptualize just how big. They've got over 320,000 employees, and for some perspective, that's as much as Google plus Apple plus Nokia, and to manage all of them, not one, not two, but 3 CEOs. Samsung's revenue brings in about 17% of the whole GDP of South Korea. That is, the entire value of everything produced in the country. They've also sold over, wait for it, 2 billion Galaxy phones. That doesn't count tablets, that doesn't count a lot of their non-smart ventures, just Galaxy-branded phones. That is a quarter of the number of people on this planet. Samsung has become so big that, in fact, it's had to branch out. Within the Samsung group, there are a whole load of sub-companies, ranging from Samsung Life Insurance, exactly what it says on the tin, to Samsung Heavy Industries and Samsung TechWin. And this is where the true depth of the company starts to become clear. Samsung Heavy Industries is actually one of the largest, believe it or not, shipbuilding companies in the world, and TechWin was founded as Samsung's defense or military division in a very literal sense of the word. It developed the K9 Thunder, an anti-infantry tank that can shoot targets up to 40 kilometers away, and this was actually used by the Korean armed forces. But it gets better. Samsung have also developed a smart sentry gun, and there's a good chance this was the first that combined surveillance, an infrared camera to pick up human activity, voice recognition, and of course the ability to shoot things. There was a car division, Samsung Motors, they sold hundreds of thousands, and Samsung's construction company built the Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world. And you probably guessed it, I could go on for a while. It doesn't end there. Helicopter engines, fighter jets, and toilet seats. Samsung isn't afraid to give something a go. Speaking of which, if you do enjoy this video, a sub would be amazing. Anyways, Samsung and Apple, you might already know this, they've been locked in a legal battle for 7 years, ever since Apple first accused Samsung of copying the design of the iPhone. Things like touch to zoom and the layout of the home screen. Apple's initial plan was to try and get Samsung smartphones completely blocked from sale. After this failed, they pursued $2 billion in damages, but they only ended up walking away with about $530 million. They won, but this amount of money for a company like Apple was barely worth their time. In fact, Apple also had a couple of losses during this battle. When it came to tablets, they filed a public complaint saying that Samsung's Galaxy Tab had blatantly copied the design of the iPad, but the judge disagreed. It massively backfired to the point where Apple was told to run both newspaper and online adverts just to state that actually Samsung hadn't copied the iPad. That's a big ouch. It's a bit strange then that these two companies, they're out there suing each other when actually they need each other. Samsung supplies about 90% of the OLED panels used in iPhones, meaning that without Samsung, Apple would be struggling for displays, and without Apple, Samsung would have lost a massive customer for its display department. We don't realize it because a lot of Samsung's products, they're not retail products with the company's brand name slapped on top of them, but Samsung is everywhere. Whilst you probably know them primarily for their phones, that's only about 20% of their business. Display panels for other companies and their semiconductor sector, processors, storage chips, and mobile image sensors are significant too. They're doing so well across these businesses that in total, Samsung earns just under $400,000 of revenue per minute. That said, it's a company that likes to reinvest a lot of this back into the company. In 2018, Samsung became the world's biggest advertiser. It's a bit of a weird title, but the implications are massive. No company across any industry spent as much as Samsung did on advertising. And also, last year, they were the biggest filer of patents in the entire United States. In fact, right now, Samsung has over 300,000 active patents. That can't have been cheap. If you've seen the video I made all about Apple, or the one I made about Huawei, you'll know I find it fascinating seeing how such massive companies had such humble beginnings. Samsung is no different. They initially started by selling noodles, dried fish, and groceries. It was a company that, before they even found their footing in electronics, dipped their toes in everything. They were founded in 1938, but they didn't make their first electrical product till 1970. That's over 30 years later. The name has been the same throughout the entire company's history, but what a lot of people didn't know is that there's actually a bit of wordplay going on. Sam means 3, and Sung means stars, and this was chosen because the founder saw his company being as everlasting as the stars. These 3 stars were then present in every single historic Samsung logo, up until about 20 years ago when they were ditched, but that underlying space theme has remained. Whilst their mobile division has changed logos, many of Samsung's other sub-companies still go by this one, which looks an awful lot like a Milky Way galaxy. Samsung's entire smartphone sub-brand is called Galaxy, and even in the way these phones have been themed, there's been clear space inspiration. In fact, this Milky Way logo, it's pretty cool. It supposedly has the S and the G on either end spilling out of the galaxy to show that Samsung is always pushing boundaries. In the 1990s, Samsung's reputation was very much quantity over quality. They were churning out products, but they just weren't all that great. The chairman at the time, he decided one day that he just wasn't going to have any of it. He ordered over 2,000 staff to gather around a pile of 150,000 Samsung products and just watch as he set them on fire. That's about $50 million worth of product gone, just for the sake of making a statement. You could say it's a bit harsh, but the company did turn themselves around, and it's possible this was why. More recently, having become this giant company, churning out tons of products which have been complete runaway successes, Samsung has also made a couple of questionable items. The Samsung Dream Doghouse is a $30,000 pad containing a pool, a treadmill, poor-controlled snack dispenser, and this is the best bit, a Galaxy S tablet. In a press release, Samsung actually said that this is for dogs who have social media profiles. What probably makes more sense is that this will be used by the owners to keep an eye on their dogs. You might have seen a movie called The Matrix Reloaded. If not, it's a sci-fi action film with this being one of the props used in it. So of course, Samsung had to make it reality. By working closely with the Matrix team, they brought it to life, complete with the infamous Matrix wallpaper and a spring-loaded earpiece. You might have also seen that new foldable Motorola Razr phone. Well, Samsung actually detailed this exact concept some time ago as a way to make a phone that was a bit more manageable in size than their current Galaxy Fold, which when unfolded is more of a tablet. But on the subject of foldy things, it's almost a secret that Samsung actually currently sells a smart flip phone. It's called the Samsung Folder 2. It runs full Android, it is touchscreen. It's just a very weird choice for anyone who's not having severe withdrawal symptoms from 10 years ago. Now, it's pretty clear that Samsung has always wanted to have their own software platform. Just as Android was starting, they tried to compete with something called Bada OS, and even after this failed and Samsung moved to Android, they continued to insist on creating alternatives to many apps and features that Android already has. They wanted to make a Samsung phone feel like a Samsung phone, not just any other Android device. It's kind of ironic then that Samsung actually had the opportunity to buy Android, and they said no. Back in 2004, the Android team was looking for funding, and so they approached Samsung, but Samsung didn't see any potential. They apparently found it almost amusing that the Android team had such lofty goals, but they were only a group of 8 people at the time. This was just 2 weeks before Google eventually bought Android. The entire landscape could have been different. Just think about it, Bixby could be your life assistant right now. You might have heard of routing. Routing allows you to gain administrator permissions over your phone, enabling you to do things like block adverts and install custom software. Anyways, Samsung doesn't really want you to root your phone because it can present additional security risks, so over the years they made it tougher and tougher to do so. It got to the point with the Galaxy S5 where there was literally a bounty or cash reward for the first person to successfully root the phone. It started at $500, but as people kept chipping in, this bounty went all the way up to $18,470. And now, for some of my absolute favorite Samsung facts. They've had some pretty great social media moments. In 2013, a man messaged them on Facebook. This was just after the Galaxy S3 was announced, and he said, "I was wondering if I could get a free Galaxy S3, whilst including a drawing he made of a dinosaur." Bear in mind, this was made by a guy who is 26 years old. Anyways, Samsung saw this and somehow decided to not just gift him the phone, but a one-of-a-kind custom S3 with this guy's drawing all over the packaging and device. It's actually tough to tell who was trolling who in this situation. Maybe Samsung thought the drawing was so bad that it would just be funny to give him his phone with that on it. Samsung Medical Center is a fully functioning hospital in Korea, which of course A is used to treat people, but B is what Samsung uses to test potential future medical technologies, and some non-medical ones too. Samsung also owns Everland, South Korea's largest, you guessed it, you probably didn't actually, it's a theme park, and I'm not gonna lie, it looks really good. Plus, they had their own professional esports team playing StarCraft and League of Legends, and a professional basketball team, the Seoul Samsung Thunders, who to this day they play in the Korean Basketball League. And finally, in this digital city we talked about earlier, they've got this dedicated department just for testing the quality of their smartphones. They'll put the phones under as much strain as possible to see if they can hold up under load, for example by playing a game for long periods of time whilst the phone is charging, or getting a butt robot to repeatedly sit on it. After the fiasco of the iPhone 6 bending, this was a pretty odd way of Samsung making sure their Note 4 didn't follow suit. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to check out the ones I made on Huawei, Apple, and myself. And with that being said, I'll catch you in the next one.